Indigenous American women are reclaiming their language by the Washington Post. The Mutsun is an indigenous tribe. For thousands of years, they have lived in what is now Central California. Quiriana Gieri is a member of the tribe and grew up with many Mutsun traditions. She foraged for mushrooms and gathered acorns. Her father fed the family with hunted deer. One day in fourth grade, Gieri realized she did not know a single Mutsun word. There is something about language that is so deeply rooted, Gieri said. She is now 49 years old. It's how you see the world and how the world sees you. According to a study by Northern Arizona University, language loss can destroy a person's sense of self-worth and their sense of who they are. Language death does not happen in privileged communities, scholar James Crawford pointed out. Most indigenous languages will die out. Indigenous American tribal languages have long been endangered. Ever since European colonists and white settlers arrived on the continent in the 16th century, they have tried to assimilate indigenous populations. Assimilation is the process of being absorbed into a different culture. It involves taking on another culture's behaviors and beliefs. In the 19th century, indigenous children were separated from their parents and put into boarding schools run by Christian missionaries. They were separated from their families for years, stripped of their traditional clothing and hairstyles, taught English, and punished for speaking their native languages. Many children died, and abuse was widespread. Now, nearly 150 years later, indigenous languages are spoken by only a small number of tribal elders, if at all. Generally, the languages are not taught to children. Half the nation's indigenous tribal languages have died out completely. Linguists, or people who study languages, estimate that up to 90% of indigenous languages worldwide will die out by the end of the century. Working to revive the Mutsun language. In an effort to reclaim their cultural identity, some tribes are trying to revive their indigenous languages. The revival of indigenous languages has been linked to increased physical and community health. This is particularly important for indigenous Americans, who have some of the worst health of any racial group in the nation. A City University of New York study found that indigenous language revival leads to lower rates of diabetes, smoking, and suicide. Natasha Warner is a linguist. She has been working on Mutsun language revival for many years. Someone else's ancestors came along and took away their language forcibly, took away their rights, Warner said of the Mutsun. The descendants come along and say, I want to get my heritage back. I want to get my people's culture back. Language is a big route into that. Gieri has dedicated her life to reclaiming her indigenous identity. After high school, she went to her family's ancestral land. She was looking to learn the Mutsun language from native speakers. But Gieri could not find any native Mutsun speakers there. In fact, no one seemed to know that her tribe still existed. Reviving languages has many benefits. Gieri first met Warner in the mid-1990s. Since then, the two have worked together to revive the Mutsun language. Gieri is part of a long line of indigenous women who have persevered language or who have preserved language and traditional cultural practices throughout history. Women are the keepers of cultural knowledge and the primary transmitters of this information to younger generations. For example, Gieri's great-great-great-grandmother, Josefa Velasquez, worked with linguists to maintain the Mutsun language. Ascension Soranzo was the first language speaker of the Mutsun tribe. She shared her language knowledge with researchers. In the year before she died in 1930, she helped a linguist record her knowledge of the language, traditional medicine, and culture. She worked to share the Mutsun language until her final breath, Gieri said. Without that, we wouldn't have anything. Indigenous American women nationwide carry forth this work today. Reviving languages offer benefits to personal identity and community and physical health. It is also critical for maintaining linguistic diversity, which adds to the psychological health of society at large, linguists say. Gieri emphasizes the way her tribe's values can be understood through the language. In Mutsun, to say thank you, one would say, Sararise Ridakasawas, which translates to blessings from the village I am of. Notice the phrase is not the village I am from, Geary said. The village, the land, the people, there is no separation. Clues like this show you how connected people are to the lands. There's also no gender, no he, she, or it in Mutsun. No matter who you are talking to, Geary said, you use the same pronoun. The language shows you we value everything equally. A connection to ancestors. In 2016, Geary and Warner developed a Mutsun English dictionary. It is now available online and in print at no cost to Mutsun people. Mutsun people that I've worked with say it's extremely deeply moving to connect to their heritage, Warner said. Learning their language allows them to connect to their ancestors. Warner and other linguists once considered the Mutsun language to be almost extinct because there were no fluent speakers. With all of this work, however, and the increased availability of the language to the Mutsun people, the language is coming back to life. There are elders just speaking the language for the first time now in their 70s. You see their faces light up, Geary said.